Did you know there are currently around 1,750 people on the wait list for an organ donation in Australia, with a further 13,000 on dialysis due to kidney failure that would also strongly benefit from an organ donation? And did you know that only 2% of those who die each year will be eligible to donate their organs when the time comes? Those are some stats that don't really work out positively. But since my family has recently gone through the process of donating a relative's body for donation, I thought it would be a good time to give you a rundown on the process and clear up some myths. So please like, share and subscribe if you find this video interesting. Now let's talk organ donation. The stats. In 2022, 1,224 people received a transplant in Australia. So let's put that in perspective with some stats provided by the Donate Life government website. In 2022, around 170,000 people died in Australia, with 80,000 of them dying in hospital, which needs to happen in order to be a donor most of the time. It is a very time-sensitive kind of thing after all. Of that 80,000, only 1,400 were considered as potential organ donors, and 1,300 of those people's families were asked to give consent for donation. You still with me? Okay. Of those 1,300, only 701 families consented. At the end of the day, 454 of those 701 actually went on to become donors. And because one body donation can result in around 7 major organ donations and more through eye and tissue donation, that means 1,224 people received transplants. Now, you may look at some of those stats and go, that doesn't really add up, but remember there are a lot of other factors going on here, and this is just the nutshell version. Who needs an organ donation? Some people have this really messed up view on the kind of people that require an organ donation, somehow believing them all to be long-term alcoholics or drug users, or they didn't take care of themselves enough, blah, 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 blah. Now, do some of these people require an organ donation? Yes. Are many of them eligible? No. For a variety of reasons, so quit your moaning. Some of the reasons people require an organ donation include kidney disease, heart defect at birth, lung transplant for those born with cystic fibrosis, corneal transplant for those going blind due to corneal damage, injury or cancer, bone tissue such as ligaments and tendons to repair scoliosis or joint replacement or loss of bone due to cancer or trauma, and skin grafts for severe burns. There is a long list of ways organ donation can help. The process. First things first, the now deceased person needs to have been registered to donate their body in the first place. And then when the time comes, the family needs to agree to donate the body. And we'll go back to the registration part in a bit. Now, just because you are now dead, you were registered and your family says it's okay, doesn't mean your organs are viable. The way you die affects the donation process and which organs and tissues can be donated. The vast majority of the time, to ensure the organs are viable for transplant, you need to have died in hospital, usually after having been on a ventilator or an ICU. Remember, we're not transplanting a new engine into a car or a memory board into a computer here. If the person dies outside of hospital, most of the time an autopsy is needed, and more info on that in our autopsy video. But even if it isn't needed, it takes time to transport that body to hospital, determine how healthy they were and what their blood type was, finding a match, then harvesting the organs and then shipping those organs off for transplant. If you have been in hospital for a while, they have all that information ready to go. They know what the condition of your organs are and less transport is required, thus less time for the organs to go bad. In saying that, eye and tissue donation can occur for up to 24 hours after your death. So you don't need to have died in hospital, and this is where my family has experience. It should be noted here that even if you would make a good donor and your family gives consent, organ donation will only proceed if there's a person on the waiting list for an organ that is a match to you. And there are many things doctors need to consider. Blood type, obviously, but also the size of the organ. An adult's heart isn't going to work well in a tiny newborn, for example. My family story. So my aunt passed away unexpectedly in her early 60s a couple of years ago. She was a registered organ donor, but she had a heart attack at home, she was overweight and smoked like a chimney. Now, you might think that this would all mean her body wasn't viable for donation, but not so. My mum and her brother were asked if they would consent to eye donation after she was brought in by ambulance to the hospital, as my aunt had been a registered donor and was pretty damn vocal that that's what she wanted. When asked this, the donation specialist staff weren't pushy. They didn't try to manipulate my mum and uncle into a decision, and I know that's what some people think will happen. Anyways, the decision was made and my aunt donated her 2 corneas before going off to autopsy. Now, my mum was kept up to date with how these procedures went by Donate Life Family Support Services the entire way through. They were extremely supportive. They answered all of mum's questions and listened to her concerns and the grief from losing her younger sister. And I am happy to report that both recipients have gained their sight back thanks to these donations. And with that good news, let's look at some of the myths around organ donation. Myth: if I'm a registered donor, the hospital staff won't try as hard to save me. Well, it's very interesting your mind went there, isn't it? No, it's not true, and if it was, the media would have cottoned onto it by now. The level of donors to recipients is nowhere near as lopsided in Australia as it is in some other countries, and our regulations on organ donation is extremely tight. In fact, doctors here, unfortunately, like a lot of other countries, will often try too hard to keep someone alive, and that's a whole other ethical debate. Myth: I don't need to discuss my registration with my family. My body, my choice. Yeah, well, that's all great in theory, but let's take a step back to reality. There are many reasons your family is asked to give consent, but the main one is to check that you hadn't changed your mind. You may have signed up 10 years ago and then had some sort of religious awakening and changed your mind, but not your registration. The staff don't know that, so they ask your family. Also, it's the law, and if they don't ask, the hospital and staff will face legal consequences if caught. So if you have a problem with this, go address it to the government and have that conversation with those closest to you. Myth: I can't be a donor if I lived in the UK. This was something Aussies my age heard a lot about as kids. The reason being that between 1980 and 1996, there was a disease going around the UK called this, which affects the body's tissue. So the media at the time was telling everyone that UK people can't donate organs in Australia, but we know better now. So if you are from the UK or have spent a lot of time over there, you absolutely can be an organ donor in Australia. The only exception to this is that those who spent 6 months or more in the UK during 1980 and 1996 can't donate their tissue, but they can donate everything else. Myth: organ and tissue donation will disfigure my body. What, you planning on going on a hot date or something? I'm not sure how people think retrieving organs for donation works, but it's certainly not a hack job. And it certainly is an old bob down the road with a kitchen knife and plunger. It is done just like any other surgery, a bit without the anaesthesia, by a surgeon and their team. You will be neatly stitched back together and the area covered in a dressing, just like you would with any other surgery. Your body will still be treated with dignity and respect, and your family can still have an open casket funeral if they wish. Myth: organ donation is against my religion. Generally speaking, all major religions, including Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Judaism, support organ donation and tissue donation because they strongly believe in acts of compassion and generosity. Now, of course, there are different sects within each of these religions that might say otherwise, but we are talking generally here. And through my work at hospice, I've seen people from each of these religions donate and their religious leaders being on board. And donation specialists can and will help your family make arrangements to support your religious and cultural requirements. Myth: I can't donate. I'm too old, too fat, I smoke too much, whatever. Here's an idea. Register and let the professionals work it out when you're dead. They know better than you do. Like I said earlier, my aunt was overweight and a heavy smoker, but her eyes were good, so they could be donated. Not all of you has to be in good nick. Sure, you may be 70 and your arthritis is a bitch, but your heart is probably fine. You may drink like a fish and have a crappy liver, but your skin and eyeballs are youthful. You get the idea. How to register. Okay, so how do you make this all happen? Firstly, unless you live in South Australia, you can no longer register on your driver's license. You must go on the Donate Life website and register there, and it takes less than a minute. Like, seriously, I've spent more time ordering Uber Eats than I did signing up to donate. And you can also opt out of certain donations if you like, but remember, you're not using them. In a couple of weeks, you'll receive a card like this, which has your name and organ registration number on it to put in your wallet. You will still be on the system, but a card just sometimes makes things easier. And last, you must tell your family of your decision and what you want. And I cannot stress this enough. Your family need to know with certainty your decision to be a donor. Families are twice as likely to decline consent if they are unsure what you would have wanted, so make it clear. But Sam, I hear you say, if only 2% of bodies are eligible to be donors, what's the point in registering? That's the fun fact about statistics and percentages. The more people that register, the more likely they are to find a body that can be donated. Sheer numbers helps big time. For more information, I'll put the official Donate Life website in the description. And Aussies, please go register. And with that, go talk death.